This is Nailing the Apex, everyone. I'm Tim Haraney. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. If you can write a review, really appreciate it. It helps us grow the show. You can also watch us on YouTube. You can follow me on social media at Tim Haraney. The U.S. Grand Prix is here, and we are in Texas. Austin, Texas, to be precise, to cover the race. And just got done with Media Day, so taping this on a Thursday evening from the Airbnb. As you can see, it's a lovely place. But no, really, it actually is a really nice place. Austin's great. This is my third time coming to the U.S. Grand Prix in Austin to cover it. 2019 was my first time covering the Austin Grand Prix. So I've raced on the track. So the track itself, I've driven on it long time ago, and then also currently. But this is the first time, sorry, this is the third time that I've been covering the Formula One race when it comes to here. But it's great. I love Austin. It's an incredible city. If you ever get a chance to come here for the event, do it. It's a lot of fun. They take good care of you. Just trying to get from city to track, they make it pretty seamless for you, which is, for some races, it's kind of not really like that. But for here in particular, what they do is they have bus stops set up around the city where, let's say you were staying out in the West End. There's a bus stop section that is set up where you can walk to it. You get on, and they drive you all the way out on this big yellow school bus out to the racetrack. They let you off, and these buses are running and circulating all throughout the early morning and really late at night too, because they have concerts that they put on after on-track events. So I think this weekend, the Killers and Queen are playing. There's also some more artists as well that are going to be playing this weekend at the same time. But all in all, I love it. Love the city. Love the atmosphere. It's a ton of fun. All right, let's get into it. Let's start talking. Okay, so today was Thursday, Media Day. Saw Adam Driver. So yes, the Adam Driver, the actor, saw him today. He was getting wheeled around the racetrack by one of the Ferrari drivers. It was Carlos Sainz wheeling Adam Driver around Coda. Charles Leclerc may also have driven him around too. I didn't see that part of it, but the one part that I did see, pretty neat. He's a tall guy. Adam Driver, very tall. Seems like a super nice guy, though. That was cool. That was, for me, one of the highlights, because he's got a movie based on Enzo Ferrari coming out at Christmas time called Ferrari, directed by Michael Mann. Really looking forward to seeing that, because he plays Enzo Ferrari. And you know what? The first trailer came out, and I was kind of like, you know what? I can't really, picture this guy as Enzo Ferrari. But watch the second trailer, and I was blown away. And I'm like, yes, okay, he is Enzo Ferrari. Texted my partner. I'm like, yo, we are going to see this. Here's the trailer. Let's go. Anyways, shows up at the track today. Incredible. Yeah, pretty awesome. So if we start looking into the weekend a little bit more, even though Red Bull Racing, they've won the Constructors Championship, and Max Verstappen, well, he's sewn up his third driver's title. So there's still, lots to talk about. I mean, some people may tune in and they're like, well, why am I watching this? Because they're not really battling for it. Well, there is a lot of storylines going on. And there's a battle for second in the Drivers' Championship, and there's a battle for second in the Constructors, and so on and so forth. And those are great stories, and there's all kinds of cool shit happening around here. So let's get into some of this. So on-track battle for second in the Drivers. So right now, it's getting really close between Sergio Perez and Lewis Hamilton. And it was funny, coming out of the summer break, I remember hearing from Lewis, and him talking about the main goal, the main objective for himself was to come from fourth in the drivers, get past Fernando Alonso for third, and then battle Sergio Perez for second in the driver's standings. At the time when he was saying that, I was like, I mean, look, come on, let's be honest here. I mean, you're not going to get that. I mean, you're so far behind, but it's just a mix of things. Sergio performing poorly, Lewis performing quite well. And now that gap has really shrunk. It's shrunk big time, where that's an interesting storyline. So what happens to Checo once, if Lewis is to move into P2 and overtake him and beat him for second in the driver's standings at the end of the season? What happens to Checo? Does he get replaced? I mean, he could. I still think he stays on. I still think Sergio is back at the team in 2024. And I think if he has dips in performance in 2024, then would be the time where they would, most likely replace him. But we'll get into Sergio a little bit more a little bit later in the podcast. I want to jump over to the battle for second in the constructor standings. Ferrari, Mercedes, battling for second. Mercedes has it right now. Ferrari's closing in as well. Ferrari trails Mercedes by just 28 points. They weren't great. Ferrari wasn't great in Qatar. And like I had said on the last pod, if George and Lewis hadn't have collided, I mean, George just would have had a good shot at winning that thing. He had the right amount of tires left. He had the pace to beat Max, especially on the strategy end. So, yeah, you could hear the frustration in George's voice at the end of the Qatar Grand Prix. Because I think he, as well as many of us, thought that was a shot. That was a shot for George to potentially win. And, they had that happen to them. Ferrari, though, wasn't great. That wasn't a great weekend for them. Obviously, Carlos Sainz not starting due to the fuel leak issue, fuel pump issue that was happening with his car. He said today, during the driver's press conference, that, that was mentally was hard for him to sit there and watch. And as he's telling us this, I'm sitting there thinking wow, this, big time competitor there. That's to hear a driver actually say that was actually agonizing for him to sit there and watch as Charles Leclerc was able to race and he wasn't. And then you have to factor in the travel and going from, the UK and flying all the way out to Qatar to compete and then not being able to do all that, but you're also doing all the preparation on the side and all that other kind of stuff. It can be quite frustrating. I can understand for sure. So this weekend for Ferrari is a big one. I think they're going to be quite strong here. I think Mercedes is going to be strong as well. They are bringing a new floor to the car for this weekend. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with the Mercedes on that end. As for the Ferrari, I mean, they got the pace to be quick here. They really do. Mercedes has always been fast at COTA. It's just a track that they go really well at, but I think Ferrari is one to look out for. Again, they trail Mercedes by 28 points in the constructors. Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting battle, I think, between those two. McLaren's resurgence has been, really, really interesting. And I sat down and spoke with Oscar Piastri today. And we were talking about, is this real? Is this a fluke? Or is this something that's actually real? And I don't think it is a fluke. And neither does he. As he explains that every single upgrade that they put onto this car has worked, that's impressive. If you go down to Aston Martin, the same can't be said there. And that's the team the McLaren is trying to catch for fourth in the constructor standings. I think they're 11 points behind. But at the end of the day, if you're Oscar Piastri and, you've re-upped you've extended your contract with this team, you have to be happy about what Andrea Stella and his group, what they've done behind the scenes, in really bringing this car back from the precipice of disaster, because the start of the season, it was not good at McLaren. Team morale in the dumps. And I think as a rookie for Oscar, you're having to not only deal with a really bad car and learn, it's like drinking through a fire hose. For Oscar, though, did a great job of accumulating the knowledge that he needed to, and he's been learning on the way, right? Like he's been growing as this season has been progressing. And I think, that's a huge feather in his cap. I really do. It's a big time deal for a rookie to do what he's doing, because it says a lot about the talent this kid's got. It's a sprint race weekend, so, anything can happen, but Oscar doesn't feel they're going to be as competitive this weekend as they were in previous weekends. And by what he's saying is, they're probably not going to be fighting for pole position or possibly P2 in qualifying, but they can be fighting for Ferrari. They can be fighting with Aston Martin. They can be fighting with Mercedes. And for them, that's the goal and objective for this weekend. And it was also really interesting, McLaren had brought their last big upgrade to Singapore, and that was to help with essentially grip and balance in slow speed corners, slow speed sections. And we talked to Oscar about that today, because we haven't really heard whether or not it worked, right? Like the upgrades that they brought to Austria, they worked. The car goes really well in high-speed corners. That's where it comes to life. But in the slower speed stuff, they were really struggling. So Oscar confirmed that the data that they had accumulated over the past few races from this upgrade, it's working. And so McLaren has nailed every single upgrade that they have brought to this car this season. That is impressive. That is like 100% record for upgrades being brought to the car. Not any team. There is no team on this grid right now that can say those words, that every upgrade they had worked. So I find that extremely fascinating. And I'm excited to see what these guys can do next season. But yeah, Daniel Ricciardo, he's back. Saw him today. It was funny. I was in the press conference room, and I'm just sitting in there waiting for the drivers to come in. And I'd forgotten that Daniel Ricciardo was even coming into that press conference, because they don't take every single driver from all the teams. They just choose one driver per team to bring them into the FIA press conference. So I was sitting in there, and Daniel Ricciardo comes like walking in with these cowboy chaps on, and like these things look like they were painted onto him. Like he was worried about sitting down on the couch where they do the interviews, because he thought his ass cheeks were gonna rip through this thing. Like he had the cowboy boots on, he had the huge belt buckle on. It was great. It was a scene for sure. I took a picture of it. I'm gonna post it on my social medias later. But it was hilarious, man. And throughout all of the press conference, I was watching Ricciardo, and he was trying to make Verstappen laugh the entire thing. And I don't know what he was doing, but like Verstappen would have to like look away from Danny Rick, because he knew if he kept looking at him and whatever he was doing, like Verstappen was going to lose it. Like in this press conference, just break down crying. So like I was killing myself at that. That was hilarious. But yeah, you know what? It's good to have Danny Rick back in the paddock. He's a good personality. He's funny, great sense of humor, great guy to talk to as well. Done plenty of interviews with him in the past, and still have more coming up. And yeah, he's great. But Ricciardo said that, he was able to maintain a lot of his fitness over this time that he's been out of the car. And so rehabbing his broken hand. Obviously, he didn't go to Qatar. Liam Lawson was in the car for that, and for Danny Rick, he stayed back. He stayed back in the UK. He spent a lot of time on the simulator. He told us he went to the Bills game, and really just try to keep that fitness up. One of the things he said though is trying to keep the strength up when the hand is broken in terms of like weight bearing exercises. So it'll be interesting to see how that upper body kind of holds up for him in this weekend's race. There are a lot of straightaways on this track, so there is time for the drivers to rest. He's not going to be too busy. There is high G loading at this track, but yeah, at the same time, I think he probably won't be as tired as if it were like Singapore or if it was Qatar. Then it would be a different story for sure. But anyway, so he flew to Nashville this week, and he did a show run on the streets of Nashville with an old Red Bull racing car. He had a great time in Nashville, he was saying. And so, it's interesting to hear like how much some of these drivers have to travel, but then still show up fresh to do like a media day. Cause like, we're talking, Ricardo going from the UK, flying over here, and then going to Nashville, and then Nashville doing the demo run, meeting all the fans, doing interviews there, getting on another plane, coming all the way over to Austin, had a day off, and then coming right in, and us just really grilling him when he rolled in, just so we could see how he's been. Frustration for him was top of mind, being out of the car for so long. He felt like he was just starting to get back into his rhythm just as he got hurt. He also spoke about Liam Lawson and spoke well about him, said that if he's able to hang around in Formula One, he'll probably one day have a seat somewhere because he was very impressive. Let's talk a bit about struggling drivers. I'd mentioned Sergio Perez like earlier, and Christian Horner's comments following the Qatar Grand Prix. The teams that are chasing them have two drivers that are really pushing them, is essentially what Christian had said. So he's talking about Ferrari, two great drivers, Mercedes, two great drivers, McLaren, same thing. And they don't. Red Bull doesn't, essentially is what he's saying. So if Perez is going to be this bad in 2024, then they just can't have it. They can't have that because of all these other teams with their driver combos. If Sergio is, this week, next season, it's going to be harder for them to win the constructors, potentially drivers as well. Like, potentially having Max win a fourth driver's title could also be extremely difficult. I mean, they need a strong number two. Max needs a strong teammate that will push him, but also a teammate that'll take those points away from those other teams and drivers and their competitors. And so I think one of the things for Sergio is getting comfortable with the balance of the race car. And this has, I think, been a theme. This has been something that I think like Lance Stroll, Logan Sargent, and a few others, Daniel Ricciardo, have been struggling with in this ground effect era, this new regulation that we are currently under. It's trying to find the right balance for the car where you're going to be able to keep your confidence. And I think if we talk about, Lance, I think something similar affects Sergio as well. I'm not saying that they're the same driver or they drive the same, but I think it affects him as well. I mean, I think for Lance, he feels that the car has gone away from him. So essentially, he's feeling that the car is a lot more snappier. So the rear end, like breaking loose easier, harder to get back once it breaks loose. And it's making the car like unpredictable. And so with having an unpredictable, race car, that really hammers your confidence. And so if we go back to the start of the season, the car had a much bigger window for both Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll to operate in. Obviously, Fernando's performances now, they're a lot different from what they were at the beginning of the season. He was on a podium tear, where now he's just struggling to get into the top 10 for qualifying and finishing, trying to finish in the top 10 to score some points for the team. And I think for Lance, and for Fernando, once they put that upgrade on the race car in Canada, it's kind of almost like, when I look at it, the team is chasing performance, right? The team is chasing downforce. And that is putting the car out of the driver's window, where at the beginning of the season, it really seemed like for Lance, the car was a lot more predictable. It had a bigger window. And now he's kind of lost that feeling, if that makes any sense. So it doesn't have that big window. It sucks your confidence. And so it's sort of a downward sort of spiral for the driver. And the upgrades that they brought have created side effects. And so I think at the end of the day, when we look at all this and you say, well, Fernando Alonso isn't struggling. No, he's not struggling, but he's also not performing at the sharper end of the grid. But Fernando Alonso is performing at an incredible level. Like, he's doing things with that car that I don't think there's really not a lot of drivers in the world who can do what Fernando Alonso is doing right now. He's extremely impressive. And so as a driver for Lance, that frustrates him. He's, was closer at the beginning of the season. And then once after Canada, Austria, once you get to the British Grand Prix, it starts to fall away from him. So the team is bringing upgrades, Aston Martin is, for this weekend. Check out my Twitter page on Friday, and I'll update what those upgrades are. And I think for team principal, Mike Crack, it's something that they really need to look into, and they're going to have to really experiment with to try and, help Lance finish on a high these next few races so he can have the confidence within himself to go into the offseason. And I think that offseason for Lance, I think that's got to be, look, you take 2 weeks off and then you come back, and every single day until testing, you are doing something in a race car. It doesn't matter what it is, but you are doing something. You're driving something, and you're in the sim. I think with this new generation of driver, you have to push yourself to that level so that, you can be on top with all of, these younger drivers that are coming in. That's all they do. They're on the sim, they're on the go-karts, they're just driving. They're always driving. And I think, that's that level that, Max Verstappen is kind of set here, right? Where it's, when Max is not in the RB19, he's back home in Monaco on the sim. That's what he's doing. Or he's at Red Bull Racing Factory on their sim. So I think that's the level that I think these drivers are at these days. It's just, he's raised it to a higher bar, Max Verstappen has. Pirelli. So we go back to last week. Pirelli gets their contract accepted by Formula One, and it's not Bridgestone. And so Bridgestone did put in a bid to try and become a tire manufacturer within Formula One. In Formula One, there were some teams there that really wanted Bridgestone on board. But anyways, Pirelli's going to be back. Their contract covers them for for the 2025 to 2027 season. There's an option for a fourth year in 2028. Now, if that 2028 option is taken up, then Pirelli, well, they'll have been making tires for F1 for 18 years. So I think one of the reasons that they stuck with Pirelli was the fact that over the years, working with teams, understanding how much teams are able to claw back performance and then predict how much downforce a car is going to be running in the following year, and then making a tire that suits that. I mean, not every year is perfect with these tires. I mean, this year they had to make an adjustment. But I think for Formula One, that gives them confidence because Pirelli was able to make that in-season adjustment for this year. And so I think that was huge for them keeping this contract. But yeah, Formula One obviously seems extremely happy about it. I would have liked to have seen Bridgestone get involved a little more aggressively maybe, and maybe we have a tire war again, but yeah, I'll save that for another day. Touch on Mercedes real quick here before we get going. Like I was saying off the top there, upgrade for this weekend, new floor. I think like for Mercedes at this point, yes, they're bringing this new floor, but I think it's more along the lines of looking at what works for next year and really test if they're on the right track for 2024. I am extremely impressed at what Mercedes has had to do this season. If you go back to the start, the car was no good. They decided to still push on in that direction with that zero side pod concept until they get to Monaco and they bring this brand new aerodynamic package and it sets them on this different direction where now they've been able to get themselves into second in the constructor standings. If you can actually believe that, it's pretty wild. But at the end of the day, I think this car that we see, this has been just a baseline, reset for the entire team, right? I mean, obviously they need to do more, but they haven't. But I think that's because of a few factors. One of them being that they're taking a lot of their, wind tunnel testing time, their CFD time, and they're putting that towards what they had this year, putting that towards next year's car. So essentially sort of doubling up almost, right? So they're always working on next year's car. And I think they've been working on that for quite a while. I would say probably June for sure. They've managed to do a lot with this car in terms of, the side impact structure, what's really affected them in the chassis. So like this car for next season is going to look totally different. I can see them catching up. Like I can see them catching up to Red Bull. Maybe not like beating them outright at every single race, but I could see it more as a battle for next season, for sure. You just for them trying to catch up to Red Bull next year, it's a monumental effort. It'll take the entire team, and it's going to take George and Lewis at the same time. Like if we look at it, Red Bull, Ferrari, McLaren, Aston Martin, they're all going to take big steps for 2024. Those cars are going to be a lot more different. They're going to be faster. They're also going to claw back, performance from Red Bull as well. So, and Red Bull's going to move that goalpost. And so what Mercedes is doing at the factory, like, is 24/7. And they have to be sure that the direction that they are on for next season is the right one and zero mistakes from here on out. Because if they make one little mistake in the offseason, forget about it. They need to start 2024 well. James Allison, and his team have been working night and day behind the scenes. And I think for George and Lewis, what they've been doing in their off time is they're going to the factory. They're working with the engineers at the factory. They're trying to unearth all of the data and information that the drivers have and is spilling it into the engineers at the factory just so they can give them everything that they've got to turn this thing around. The drivers are going in on the weekends where they have off. That normally doesn't happen. I mean, usually the only time engineers really get to work with drivers is at the racetrack during Grand Prix weekends. But that is working with the driver to make the car faster for that weekend, not make the car faster for the future. And so it is going to be a total team effort on all fronts for Mercedes if they want to get back to their winning ways for 2024. Alfa Romeo, keep an eye on them this weekend. Valtteri Bottas showed up looking like a cowboy. That was pretty cool. I posted it over on my Twitter. They're climbing their way back. Alfa Romeo is climbing their way back through the standings. They have had a remarkable turnaround in performance of late. And for them, they feel they can track down and pass Williams for 7th in the constructor standings. So it'll be interesting to see if they're going to be able to do that. I think every single race they go to from here on out, it's going to be really fine margins to break into that top 10, to score that 1 point, to score those 2 points, to get that 9th place. It's going to be really difficult for them, but they have to be perfect from here on out to do it. But I'm interested to watch that battle because, for Williams, it's, seeing them this high up. They haven't been this high up in the constructor standings for a very long time. And for them to be this high, yeah, I had dinner with the Williams team last night, and they are ready for this battle with Alfa Romeo. They said it, and at the end of the day, I'm excited to see what Alex Albon could do. We were talking about Logan Sargent. When could he score his first points, and if he's going to be back next season, and so many good storylines down at Williams too. Anyways, I have Zach Brown coming on the show on Friday. Get your questions in, and I will put them to Zach. You've been listening to Nailing the Apex. Please head on over to Spotify. Give us a 5-star rating and a follow. Same goes with Apple Podcasts as well. You can watch us on YouTube. You can follow me on social media at Tim Harani, and I'll be back later on this weekend as well with more from the U.S. Grand Prix. Also, like I had said, the Zach Brown thing should be posted either Friday or Monday. We may run it into the show. I haven't gotten confirmation on that just yet, but I will post it on my socials to let you know when that podcast will be coming out. Thanks again, everyone, for watching and listening, and we'll talk to you all later.